Okay, so we are going to pick up where we left off. So we just finished talking about Russia. Now we're going to move on to Central Asia, which would be the stands here, and then the Caucasus region here. And I'm going to also include Afghanistan as well. So first thing, let's look at some important geographic features. Number one, the Caspian Sea. That would be this body of water. The Black Sea, I'm going to jump over there, the other major body of water here. And then the Aral Sea is right over here, right on the border between Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. When we look at the religion, the dominant religions of these countries, there are two countries, well, I should include Russia. Russia is predominantly Christian, that's the dominant religion. Then we have Georgia is Christian. Armenia is Christian. And every other country here is overwhelmingly Muslim. So Azerbaijan is Muslim, and this is the symbol for Islam. Kazakhstan is a majority Muslim, but they do have a significant Christian minority, which we'll look at on the next slide. But overwhelmingly, maybe I'll make this bigger. It's overwhelmingly or predominantly Muslim. Then Uzbekistan is Muslim, Turkmenistan is Muslim, Kyrgyzstan is Muslim, Tajikistan is Muslim, and Afghanistan is Muslim. So let's look at some statistics for these countries. Here I have them all listed for Central Asia. The green highlight means it's the highest in that category. Here, religion. So you can see Afghanistan, almost 100% Muslim. Azerbaijan, almost 100% Muslim. Kazakhstan, remember, that's a mix. Still overwhelmingly Muslim, but a pretty substantial minority of Russian Orthodox Christians, 26%. But Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, overwhelmingly Muslim. And again, the three kind of Christian exceptions to that would be Russia, which I don't have listed here, Apostolic Christianity for Armenia, Orthodox Christianity for Georgia. When you look at the populations, significantly smaller than the United States. Even Kazakhstan, which is a pretty big country, still has a tiny fraction. Looking at Afghanistan, they have 36.6 million people. We have 333 million people roughly. So they have about 10% of the U.S. population. When you look at densities, you have a few tiny countries like in Azerbaijan, where it's many times what the U.S.'s population density is, and that's a 120. Whoops, that should be actually highlighted. Let me quickly fix that. There we go. And this one should not be highlighted. There we go. Yeah, I think that's right now. So 123.4 people per square kilometer on average. And Kazakhstan, a huge country with a decent population, but still it's such a big country, they only have 7 people per square kilometer. When you look at the wealth per person, the United States is just a little bit below $60,000 per person on average. Kazakhstan has a pretty respectable $26,300, and Afghanistan is down to just $2,000 a year per person, which, if you do the math, there's 365 days in a year. That means that they have about $6 per day to spend on everything that they need. Life expectancy in the U.S. is about 80. 77, you see most of these are around between 70 and 80. The notable exception to that would be Afghanistan, which is at 52.8 years is the typical life expectancy in Afghanistan. And then this is the percentage of the population that has cell phones. So obviously some of these are over 100%, which doesn't make sense. I guess I should clarify. This is the number of cell phones compared to the population of the country. So this means that in the United States, um, ev- on average, everyone has a cell phone, and about a third of the population has a second cell phone. Maybe it's a business cell phone. And notice, almost all of these are above 100%, and even a poor country, only $2,000 a year, and 63% cell phones for that population. The only other one that's below 100% is Uzbekistan. And these are new numbers. I just updated this. All right, let's keep moving. So we're first going to look at 3 countries between the Black Sea over here and the Caspian Sea over here. And these are the Caucasus Mountains. This is where we get the phrase Caucasian from, which people typically use to mean a white person. So Caucasus Mountains, Caucasians come here, or come from here. So this is the region, again, between the Black Sea over here and the Caspian Sea over here. And when I reveal what is below the map, you will see where the countries lie. Send to the back. So Georgia's over here, Armenia's over here, Azerbaijan's over here, Iran to the south, Turkey over here to the west, and Russia to the north. So we're going to look at these 3 countries, though: Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. We'll start with Armenia. Capital is Yerevan. This is the flag. Here's the map of it. And you see some, if you look really closely, there's some kind of weirdness here. You have these little bubbles, and you have a part of Azerbaijan that is divided from the rest of Azerbaijan. And there's some disputes there, but we'll get to that in a bit. Most people consider Armenia to be the very first official Christian nation in the world. And this happened in the 4th century, which would be the 300s. So this is around the time when the Roman Empire finally decided to stop persecuting Christians. So they were already a Christian nation at that point. Armenia, as I said, does not really get along with Azerbaijan, and part of that is because of the religion difference. Armenia is predominantly Christian, and Azerbaijan is predominantly Muslim. And those 2 groups don't get along. And one of the big things is the territory disputes there. In 1988, there was a really powerful earthquake that just devastated the nation of Armenia. 30,000 people died. Hundreds of thousands of people were left homeless. Here's a picture of an ancient church that was destroyed. Here's a picture of people digging through the rubble. Here, he's using a megaphone to try to look for survivors here if they can hear cries of help. One of the things, if you ever do visit Armenia or Georgia, both of them are famous for their very, very old churches and monasteries. Places like this, and not all of them were destroyed in that earthquake. Another time when you will be more likely to hear about Armenia in the news is in their dispute with Turkey. In World War I, Armenia says that Turkey committed genocide, systematically tried to kill all the Armenians. This is something that Turkey vehemently denies, and it's a source of contention. The United States has on multiple instances condemned the genocide that took place, and every time we do that, Turkey gets mad, they pull their diplomats, they say they're not going to talk to us, and then oftentimes people will back down in the U.S. and say, well, we didn't quite mean genocide, just that it's a shame that so many people died in World War I. Yeah. Moving on to Georgia, and here you can see crosses make up its flag. So again, the Christian roots here are pretty deep. Georgia does a lot of trade with both Russia up here and Ukraine at the north end of the Baltic Sea. They grow lots of citrus fruits, so they're in some ways kind of comparable to the U.S. state of Georgia. This would be like oranges, limes, lemons, that type of thing. They also grow grapes. They too are famous for their old Christian churches and monasteries. They had some pretty crazy stuff happening in 2009, a failed coup attempt. And hopefully you remember that a coup is a forceful government overthrow. This was an attempted forceful government overthrow, and you can see the leader's bodyguards were very well armed, but had plenty of people that don't like him. And for that, we'll jump ahead here. Here you have a picture of the leader who people tried to overthrow. And you can tell they're making comparisons to Hitler. So they're taking poses that are similar to poses that they have of Hitler. So here pointing, Hitler pointed. Here lips pursed together, Hitler had lips pursed together. Here holding out his hands, Hitler did the same thing. Kind of making a chopping motion with his hands, so did Hitler. Ooh, they're both wearing military hats. Yeah, so this is propaganda to say that Georgia's leader was bad. If I jump back, here are the Caucasus Mountains that we were talking about. And on the map here you can see the greater Caucasus Mountains coming through. Now you notice some weird little lines here. This says Abkhazia over here. Here says South Ossetia. And there's another one, Ajaria. Well, if we go to the next slide, both Abkhazia, so this is the map again, and it's a little bit hard to make out, so let me let's see, what should I outline it with? Maybe black. So this it's hard to trace with my mouse. Alright, this is roughly the map of Georgia outlined. And this region here is Abkhazia, and this region here is South Ossetia. And they don't like Georgia. They want to leave, and since they border Russia, and Russia has some disagreements with Georgia, Russia said, yes, we recognize both of these as separate independent countries, even though no one else does. Well, Georgia said, you can't leave, and so they sent their military in, and Russia said, oh, yes, they can leave, and they sent in their navy, sent in tanks, and they demolished the entire Georgian navy. They destroyed most of their military. It was really bad, and they still occupy these two territories of Abkhazia and South Ossetia. One other kind of interesting thing, moving to another subject, Joseph Stalin was not born in Russia. You may recall we talked about him in the Russian unit, that he was the notorious leader of the Soviet Union who was responsible for killing an estimated 28 million of his own people. He was born in Georgia, but that does make sense if you remember that the Soviet Union included Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Ukraine, Moldova, Belarus, the Baltic states, and the Stans. And there are still people in Georgia who admire, respect Joseph Stalin, and look back to the good old days when the Soviet Union and communism were running the show. So here's a picture of a Georgian holding up a bust of Joseph Stalin. Kind of crazy. Moving on to Azerbaijan. So again, those two were Christian nations. Now we're on Azerbaijan, which is a Muslim nation. Their capital is Baku, and you can see the symbol of Islam, the crescent moon and the star. So this is kind of a giveaway that a nation is Muslim, if you see that. Well, Azerbaijan was controlled by the Persian Empire, which is modern-day Iran, which makes sense, it's bordering Iran. They were controlled for about 1,000 years, and Iran at that time, Persia, was Muslim. They were converted by like the the Mongols and the Muslim invaders. So they were heavily influenced by both Russia and Iran, and they're still heavily influenced by the two countries. One nice thing that Azerbaijan has going for it is the huge oil reserves they have along the coast here. The Caspian Sea has many rich deposits of petroleum. And so here is a picture of one of those oil rigs set up to pump oil from out of the seafloor of the Caspian Sea. So even though this is a very, very, very small country, I mean much smaller than the state of Illinois, it's 23rd largest producer of oil in the world. Another thing worth pointing out for a number of these countries is that the Silk Road, the ancient Silk Road connecting China to Europe, went through here. So here's the remains of a tower. It's a famous site. This was built much later than the Silk Road. But here are some glyphs, some engravings, and this is pretty common to see along the Silk Road. Another thing worth noting here, these other Central Asian countries, so we're done with the Caucasus region over here. Now we are up to the Central Asian nations, all those stands. And again, it's worth noting that Russia controlled these countries, that the Silk Road came through here, and that all of these countries really struggle with trade and a lack of fresh water because they are landlocked. Or I should say the trade is connected to them being landlocked, not the lack of water. But landlocked means, so you might look at this and say, they've got the Aral Sea, they've got the Caspian Sea, they've got a bunch of bodies of water. How are they landlocked? Well, landlocked is typically defined as you not having navigable water to get to an ocean. So if we were to go back to Georgia, for instance, Georgia is not considered landlocked because they are on the Black Sea, and the Black Sea connects to the Mediterranean Sea, and the Mediterranean Sea connects to the Atlantic Ocean. So they're connected to an ocean, so Georgia is not landlocked, even though they're pretty deep within the Asian, European, African continents. They're kind of smushed in the middle there. But they're not landlocked because they can reach an ocean by water. These countries can't, and Uzbekistan is in a really bad spot because they are what's called doubly landlocked. They are landlocked by landlocked countries. That's not good. All right, so let's work through these, starting with Afghanistan. Capital of Afghanistan is Kabul. Russia tried to control it for about 10 years, and they resisted fiercely. And with assistance from the United States, we gave them weapons, gave them some training. They were able to prevent the Russians from taking over. But it took 10 years before the Russians or the Soviet Union gave up. Another thing worth knowing about Afghanistan is the Khyber Pass. This is a very, very important pass that connects Afghanistan to Pakistan. And it goes through the Hindu Kush Mountains, which are on the map right here. Hindu Kush Mountains. So it's a pass, and these are very steep mountains because it's right around the Himalayas, which has Mount Everest, the highest peak in the world. So when you go through the Khyber Pass, you're actually going back and forth, kind of like that Mir diamond mine in Russia. A famous site that no longer exists is the Bamyan Buddha. That was over here in the cliff, and this is what it looks like today. And just so you can kind of get an idea for the size, this is two people, and one of them is on a horse or a donkey or something like that. So these are incredibly large statues. Very, very large. And they were blown up by the Taliban, which was the government of Afghanistan for a while. And they blew them up because the Taliban are Muslims, and they said these are idols. People are following a false religion, and so we're going to blow these up. And I guess one interesting question I wanted to pose to you, give you something to think about. One of the 10 Commandments for Christians is to not have any idols. So I'm curious what you think. Do you think it's okay to do this? To blow up ancient works of art and architecture? And what else, if you think it is okay, then what else could we blow up? Could we blow up the Egyptian stuff? The pyramids and the statues and the Sphinx, because that was part of their mythology? Or is it okay to leave that because no one really worships Egyptian gods anymore, but some people do follow Buddha, so we should blow up this? Or do you think we shouldn't blow up anything? And we're not talking about killing people. I'm talking about destroying idols. So something to think about. Here, by the way, because of this war with the Russians, the Red Cross estimated back in 1994 that it would take 4,300 years to remove all of the landmines placed by the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. So we talked about landmines with Bosnia-Herzegovina, and we'll talk about it with other countries, but Afghanistan is one of those countries with huge amounts of landmines, sadly. And you can't talk about Afghanistan without talking about the Taliban and Osama bin Laden. So that's what this slide is about. They were ruled from about 1995 to 2001, and this is when they controlled the majority of the country. They technically were trying to take over as soon as the Soviet Union gave up. So some things to know about the Taliban. Again, this is the name of the Afghanistani government. And they ruled the nation of Afghanistan very, very strictly, using a strict interpretation of the Quran. And when you do that, that is known as Sharia law. And everyone's interpretation of the Quran is going to look a little different. So everyone's Sharia law is going to look a little bit different. But this is a very, very strict, rigid, what we would consider to be a cruel interpretation that meant that women, for instance, had to wear veils all the time, like full body coverings. You can only see the eye slits. It was wrong and improper for girls to have an education. Women shouldn't be working outside of the home, so they shouldn't be employed by anyone apart from, just doing housework. If you are a thief and you are caught, they will literally cut off your hands and or feet. If you are caught committing adultery, you will be stoned to death, or you will, as this picture is showing, have a gun put to your head, and they will execute you right there. And one thing that they do to really reinforce and make this real is that when this type of thing happens, when there's a thief or adultery or some other serious crime committed, they will round up the entire village. They will all get together in a soccer arena, and they will force everyone to watch the execution or the cutting off of the hands or feet. And this is, they take this very, very seriously. This is not just a book that's on a law that's on the books and doesn't get enforced. This was actively enforced regularly. So I have some pictures to document this. First one is not so bad. I mean, it's bad, but it's not graphic. So this is a woman who wasn't wearing her head covering properly, and this was an enforcer of the Sharia law. Again, the strict interpretation of the Quran, which is a Muslim's holy book. Their version of the Bible, kind of. So he was clubbing her with a wooden stick for not being modest enough, for not wearing a veil head covering like this. The next picture, it's going to get gradually more graphic. So this picture, I'll describe it first. This is a picture of a kid in the distance, so it's pretty small. You can't see a whole lot, but you can see an arena, and a kid is running, excitedly holding up the cut off hands of a thief. So if you think that's going to bother you, don't look. I'm going to show that in 3, 2, 1. So here is the arena, you can see the crowd of people, and it's a ton of people. This is the soccer field, and here they zoomed in. You can't quite make it out, but he's holding up the severed hands of a thief. And that's devastating. And so if your hand is cut off, everyone knows then you are a thief. Or if you're missing a foot, everyone knows you are a thief. The next one is much more close up. Do not look at this. If you are at all queasy, you're going to see a clear picture of someone holding up a thief's hands. So again, do not look if that's going to bother you. And I'm going to show it in 3, 2, 1. And I don't enjoy showing this, but I want you to realize how different the world is for other people. All right, it's covered, so it's safe to look now. Yeah, that's really really bad. And what if a thief was falsely accused? You can't just attach a foot or a hand again. So this is very extreme and very cruel. So why do we know so much about the Taliban? Most people didn't until 9/11 happened. In 9/11, the World Trade Center, the Pentagon was attacked, and a plane was hijacked that passengers took back and crash landed in a field. But the mastermind behind those attacks on September 11th, 2001, was led by a group called Al Qaeda, and the leader of Al Qaeda was Osama bin Laden, pictured here. And these are different people. These are Taliban fighters. Again, the Taliban was the government of Afghanistan. Al Qaeda was a separate independent group that just happened to be in Afghanistan. Well, after 9/11 happened, the United States found out what group. They actually claimed it. They said, we did this, and here's why we did it. The United States is evil. They are ignoring Allah. They are violating the Quran, and so they need to be punished. And so Osama bin Laden claimed it, said, I am Osama bin Laden, we did this. I lead a group, Al Qaeda, we're responsible, and you need to repent, United States. So there was no secret. We knew where they were based. In fact, and this is kind of the crazy part, we trained Osama bin Laden. He was one of those Afghanistani freedom fighters fighting against the Russians from 1978 to 1989. So we trained him and equipped him, armed him. And then he got mad at us because we didn't help rebuild after the Soviet Union left. So he decided to make war against us. So we went to Afghanistan, which was again ruled by the Taliban, and said, Taliban, you are housing a terrorist who just did horrific things to the United States. Capture him, turn him over to us, and everything will be good. And the Taliban, which, again, they're following Sharia law, a strict interpretation of the Quran, which is the holy book of Islam, and they said, no, we kind of agree with him, actually. So, no, you can't. He said, maybe we weren't clear. We aren't just going to ignore this. We are going to get him. You either help us, or we will have to take you out first, and then we will capture Osama bin Laden. And they said, bring it on. And so that's why we had the war in Afghanistan, which is separate from the war in Iraq. So we went in Afghanistan, we defeated the Taliban government, had elections, had a new system. So suddenly women didn't have to wear veils like this. They could have an education. They could work outside the home. Thieves were not having their limbs cut off. If you committed adultery, you weren't executed for it. Things dramatically changed. So we took out the Taliban, although they didn't give up. So they had rebels hiding in remote parts of the mountainous region. Let me go back here. All the mountains, especially on the outskirts of the country. And they continued fighting, which is why we had to stay in Afghanistan for such a long time. Because they still haven't given up. They still are trying to get back their country. And actually, right now, in March of 2019 or 2020, we are currently negotiating with the government, or with the government in exile, the Taliban, saying, okay, we really want to be done in Afghanistan and get all of our troops out. We want the fighting in Afghanistan to stop. Let's negotiate something. And some people are rightfully concerned, saying, do we really want to give them a chance? And others say, well, it's not our fight. But yeah, so we overthrew the Taliban. Then we started searching for Osama bin Laden, and he fled into the mountains where we couldn't really find him. And you could drop bomb after bomb after bomb, carpet bomb the place, and still not find him, and still not get him. And then we eventually found out, during Barack Obama's presidency, that he was hiding in Pakistan, actually, near the border. And using that information, Barack Obama had Osama bin Laden executed with a special elite team that was sent in secretly. So, a lot of explanation there. Some other things to know about like Sharia law. In general, with Sharia law, again, the strict interpretation of the Quran, if you are born to a Muslim family, that means you are Muslim. If you convert to Islam, that makes you a Muslim now. So Islam is the religion, Muslim is a follower. It'd be like Christianity and Christian. If you are either born a Muslim or a convert and become a Muslim, then if you ever leave Islam, you are committing apostasy, which is illegal and punishable by death. Now, before being executed, they will give you one last chance to repent and come back to Islam. If you don't do that, then they go ahead and kill you. If you proselytize in most of these countries, because Afghanistan wasn't the only country that was ruled by Sharia law, if you proselytize, that is illegal. And you could get sent to prison, or be exiled, or potentially be executed. And if you are a non-believer, you are given simply one chance to convert. And that's why these percentages, if I go back to the chart, that's why these percentages are so high. Because you will be killed if you aren't a Muslim in most of these countries. Or your life is going to be really, really, really tough and uncomfortable and unpleasant and dangerous. So that's a big deal. All right, moving on to the other stand countries, and these will go a bit more quickly. Kazakhstan, capital is Astana. It's got many natural resources, like chromite, lead, copper, uranium, tons of resources. These are just the leading exports. They don't have really any major cities on the Caspian Sea because there's not much rainfall there. So you see two on the entire map, two on the Caspian Sea. And that doesn't mean there aren't smaller villages, but nothing really all that large because the Caspian Sea really doesn't get a whole lot of rain. This over here is a giant mausoleum that was built by Tamerlane, a Mongol conqueror, but wasn't built for him, and it wasn't even finished. So a mausoleum is a house for the dead. It's like a really big tomb. They also, the Silk Road went through there, so you will find more rock glyphs or engravings on the rocks along the Silk Road here. Moving on to Kyrgyzstan. So Kyrgyzstan's capital is Bishkek. The Tian Shan Mountains divide Kyrgyzstan, so you can see it right here. They divide Kyrgyzstan from China, kind of a natural boundary or border, which is part of the reason why they have maintained independence from China. They too have Silk Road engravings on rocks. And this is their flag, with like grains of wheat, the bundles, and a sun. Tajikistan, this is kind of interesting. Capital is Dushanbe, that's not all that interesting. They have ties with Iran, even though they don't even border Iran. But they've maintained pretty strong ties and are good trade partners. Here's one of the bizarre things. This Suleiman mountain is considered sacred, and only men are supposed to climb up it. It's just considered wrong and disrespectful for a female to climb up it. Moving on to Turkmenistan. Capital is fun to say, Ashgabat. Sounds like an orc to me. Sorry if you're from Turkmenistan. It just sounds cool, though. 80% of Turkmenistan is covered by the Karakum Desert. And Kum actually means desert in this area of the world. It's, they speak Turkmeni and Uzbek and Kazakh and Kyrgyz and Tajik. So different languages, but it's relatively similar, and Kum means desert. So Karakum and Uzbekistan has the Kitsulkum Desert, and both of them, huge chunks of their country are covered by desert. So in Turkmenistan, it's the Karakum Desert. But Turkmenistan has one really big thing going for them. They border the Caspian Sea. And you know what that means? Petroleum. So they lie directly across from Azerbaijan on the Caspian Sea. And so they have lots of petroleum and natural gas that they mine from there. And, oh, I answered this question. Yes, it comes from the Caspian Sea. They have a famous site, the Merv Fortress, which lay along the Silk Road. Yep, you guessed it. And this is mind-boggling to me. This is Darvaza, Turkmenistan, and it is a pit that had huge amounts of natural gas, and then something went wrong. Some of the pit collapsed, it ignited, and they've had natural gas burning. Oh, come on, move. You want to move. There we go. Natural gas mine collapsed in 1971, and to prevent the gas from, like, it's heavier than air, so rolling along the ground and killing people, they decided to light it on fire, figuring it would burn itself out in just a few days. It's been burning for over 40 years now. That is just crazy to me. And I just checked last year, and it's still burning. And here's a picture of it. Some people call it the gate or door to hell, because it kind of looks like that. But the natural gas is just seeping out of the rocks. It seems a shame that all of that's being, wasted, destroyed. But it's not safe to be around there. I mean, people will stand along the rim and try to get pictures. But it's not like you can just hop in or... Yeah. Anyways, we got Uzbekistan, last country here. Uzbekistan capital is Tashkent. It's a very, very poor country. And again, this is the one that's doubly landlocked by landlocked countries. So they don't have much in the way of trade opportunities. They too, 80% of their land is covered by a desert, in this case the Kitsilkum Desert. They started growing huge amounts of cotton, but cotton requires a ton of water, and they have very, very little water. The big bit of water they did have was the Aral Sea, but because they've been pumping water for irrigation of cotton fields, they have been destroying the Aral Sea. So this is what the Aral Sea looks like today. Here you have a fishing boat. They used to have a big fishing industry. It's basically gone now. This is what the Aral Sea used to look like when I was a kid. This is what it looks like today, roughly. This is crazy. These dark bits are all that's left of the Aral Sea. Now, they have since realized that this was a bad idea, and they're making efforts to try to get it to come back, and some of those efforts are producing some success, but this is very, very hard on the nation, and especially on the fishing industry. Jumping back to finish off this unit, the Registan is this complex here in Uzbekistan, and it has 3 separate buildings called madrasas. And a madrasa is a Muslim seminary. So, or that's what I call it. I'm sure they have some different title other than madrasa, but it's where Muslims can go to learn about the Muslim faith, to become kind of clergy or pastors or imams. And Tamerlane is buried here at the Registan. And remember, he is a famous Mongol conqueror who built, over here, this mausoleum. And that is the unit here.